I'm Anna. I'm here with Agam from Menscape, one of our customers down in Nashville. Thank you for joining us today. Want to just start from the top. Tell me a little bit more about you, the business, how you got started, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm Agam. I'm from our team at Menscape in Midtown Nashville. So a little bit about my background. So I actually started up my career in the automotive industry, and so I worked at Subaru for almost like 14 years in their marketing department. And so I eventually moved on to doing like some other school things, did like BA and stuff, and had a unique opportunity to work at a law firm for a little bit. And then COVID started up, and I kind of had an epiphany, which was like in the past, like I had like experienced some like waxing services at one of the more mainstream waxing spots, and I was just kind of like, this is kind of weird. There's just got to be like a better way to do this, and so Menscape basically started up as like an idea in 2020 over COVID. And we kind of came to life in December 2021. And so we have been around for about 4 years ever since. And we provide spa services for guys. So we do a variety of services, such as we do like massages. We also do aesthetic services, such as like waxing. We're unique in the area where we also do body hair trimming services. We do skincare, such as like facials, body treatments, manicures and pedicures, and those types of services as well.
I'm really curious talking about like having the idea kind of planted over the pandemic and obviously like creating a suite of services that are very heavily touch dependent. Like, how did scaling up the business look during that period and taking it from idea to actually executing?
Terrifying. Terrifying is probably the best way to put it, because I don't have a lot of experience in this industry. It's not like, I've owned like 4 or 5 businesses, right? This was like my first gander, like into this like world. And so I mentioned that to you, like we started with like one room. Initially, the idea was like, how cool would it be if we had this like larger location that almost kind of mimicked like a larger retail chain that provides like waxing and grooming types of services. So that was the original idea. And so Menscape is actually located off Music Row in Nashville. So there are a lot of like publishing studios like literally right down the street from us. And so we started with one room as just like an idea, as like a concept. And there was a lot of listening that was done. So we end up, because of my background being in marketing, like I went ahead and I did put up a website, did a little bit of like research on clients to kind of understand like if we did something thoughtful, if we did something kind of groundbreaking, what does that look like? And I'm a believer that you have to be able to listen to people before you assume the answer to fixing their problems, right? And so I mentioned that to you because like we did a lot of client research. We listened to their full experience from the beginning of their journey of like what they would want, what types of services they're interested, where they needed help, to like how they would kind of connect back with us, after they left, whether it's through like a reminder text for them to kind of come back in or it's social media. So long story short, like we started with that one room, and then in about a year and a half, like 2 years in, we opened up another room. So we had 2 aesthetics rooms to start, and then in May of 2025, we just expanded into the newer facility that we're in. And so we expanded into massage and into manicures and pedicures, and we moved into this space once again based on client feedback. These were things that people, were interested in. So we tried to do something really thoughtful and unique, which was like, can we have all these different types of services in one location?
I am curious though, like mentioning you were trying to do something that was a little bit more like uncharted territory, potentially kind of like conceptually new to your audience. Like, what was that initial feedback when you're pitching an idea that is like totally new, or at least strays from the norm for people?
So I kind of looked at it in like 3 different phases. So one was like, what are expectations that people already have, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the industry. So that's like the current spas and those types of things right now, right? Then I think it was us catering towards guys, right? So that was another group of people that we kind of listened to. And then so it was the traditional versus what consumers actually wanted. And then there was like this global change that was happening, right? So there's like this little trifecta of things that were occurring. And so I mentioned that because I think in the middle of all three of these situations is a really good solution. And so we listened to all these things. And one of those takeaways was over COVID, people went from like just grinding to like catching their breath and being like, I should probably take care of myself better. Right. So, and that the whole concept of self care started growing even more, even amongst the guys. So, we kind of looked at all three of those little pieces to the equation. And like, we learned little simple things, right? That it was like when a guy went into, like a large box like waxing place or something like along those lines, what ended up happening was they just fell out of place. So, the thought was like, how do you make guys feel a little bit better, right, about these services? And being in a full blown pink environment wasn't honest. A lot of companies out there, like, we offer services for men and women, but everything is pink, right? And it was like you see pictures of, people on the walls, and they were all predominantly like women, right? So having said that, there's a lot of like research that we did to kind of like really listen and understand to what clients wanted. We already, like I did like a bunch of experimenting and going to a lot of local places as well, while also kind of taking a step back and seeing like what are trends, what are global trends around the world, even like watching like YouTube videos in India, right? So like just trying to see like what everything kind of looks like, and like based on that broader perspective, how can we create a better solution than what is currently out there.
So like use this moment of self-care to really think about, as people are increasingly interested in this, how can we like build on that moment with something that actually serves their needs and isn't like, come to our space that caters to you, but everything is pink and purple and fuzzy. Yeah.
You nailed it. I think one of the funny examples in this is like, so we also do body hair trimming. So a lot of places tend to cater towards women that are just like, we just do waxing. So people leave almost like a Barbie doll or a Ken doll, right? So if a guy's getting waxed, like companies are like, yeah, we're going to just go ahead and wax back hair. And then there's like a fine line between their back hair and their arm hair, right? So long story short about that is like, that just looks weird, right? Yes. And so like, can we just trim and blend it in a little bit so it just looks human, right? It just look a little more natural, right? So it was like that. We're also unique, like in the area where we don't have a million different photos on our walls or anything. A lot of places are like, oh yeah, we have a TV on the wall, right? Like, so it's just like we're constantly getting hammered with more and more information, like the news and like all this other like crap. And sometimes there's a gift of just having a little bit of silence, right? People just want to be able to get away from like their friends and family for like a little bit in their work life. Can we create a place that felt almost like a little bit of an escape? That actually kind of took you away from that reality. Like one or two other like random facts here is that like we also learned that like we listened to our clients and we understood like what is the cadence of communication with them, right? Like do we, like a lot of companies just use and abuse text, and there are other companies out there that'll just hammer you with like ads via emails, and that's it, like everyone's already like we're always in a shouting match already, right? So can we approach it differently and be more thoughtful and respect people's time and effort, right? And so last like touch in this is like we're also really unique in the area where we don't take tips. So that's like really nice in that like in the world where trust is kind of lost. What we created was a solution, which was like what the price you see online is going to be the price you're going to pay. There's no additional weird math you have to do. There's no weird interaction with somebody one-on-one where you have to judging their pay, right? So we listened to like clients and we looked at those global trends, aka like people being like tipped out. And we said, like, if we had to redo everything from scratch, how would we do it thoughtfully and create a better solution than, other organizations that are out there? There's this element of transparency, right? Like transparency builds trust. And so when organizations aren't transparent, it kind kind of becomes a barrier to building that trust with like clients. And so when we kind of like started this journey, it was like, how can you be as transparent like as possible, and allow for that trust? Because like, we're not built for like on like a typical day, we're not like running through hundreds of clients in a day, right? We weren't built on volume. We were built on quality of like service. So like to build that trust from the very beginning and to kind of continue that, like I'm not in it for us to kind of constantly keep on like growing and having like thousands of clients. I was just like, can we have clients we actually like? Can we grow with people that trust us and respect us so we can continue to build those relationships on? And I think in an industry that is constantly churning through people to create something that's very thoughtful and that allows us to build something that actually makes you feel like you're a part of something more, I think is really powerful, because like I think a lot of these relationships over time have become, whether it's from like a spa to like, you know, the customer, it could be from like a barbershop to a customer. Like a lot of these like relationships have gotten so funny where it just feels so transactional. And so the one thing that I think anyone in this industry kind of knows, like anyone that's providing the service is automatically a therapist, right? Like that's like a part of the job. And so can we create those relationships where people actually find that value, not so much just in the service alone, but just in that human connection, which, you know, in the world of AI and everything else, like seems kind of lost, you know?
Yeah, dilutes a lot of that person to person connection.
Yeah, totally.
I want to switch gears a little bit. We talked about kind of starting in that one room and scaling up from there. Tell me about when Mangomint entered that journey, when you started using Mangomint and what the impetus was to move over.
Yeah. So I am very grateful for like Mangomint in that, like, as like a small business startup, like I wanted to work with like an organization that was very thoughtful, right? That actually felt like they had a future kind of lined up like ahead of them, and also could listen to my feedback. So like I mentioned the feedback part of it because like if organizations are just kind of out there, like the previous provider I had, I would provide them like feedback on things, and it was just like, cool, here, let's talk to like 84 different people and see like what the possible solution to this was. Which like I really appreciate about Mangomint, which is like it's been always really easy to get a hold of somebody if I need any help. But that moment for us was really and another software that we're using is a point of sale software that also has like an appointment system built in. So I was using that, and then we just kind of went through some like headaches where the like the way the system was like set up to submit forms to clients like was kind of a pain in the butt, right? Or the way clients were actually booking the appointment was kind of a pain in the butt, right? So knowing all of that, like having had the chance to kind of talk to some folks like at Mangomint as well, I just had the feeling that the team there was progressive. So I could see that the organization isn't just like, hey, this is what we're doing and this is the way it's going to be for like the next like 20, 30 years. Like it felt like it was an organization that was going to continuously grow and evolve. I think that was a really big part of it. I think there are other technical things that I think were really important as well. Like if someone tries to book an appointment, how easy is it, right? And easier it is for someone to book the appointment, the higher chance they are going to convert and actually book the appointment, which AKA means revenue for the organization that's, you know, providing the services, right? So like that was like another big element too that I think really made a big impact. And then I've been grateful in the conversations with Mangomint that like you guys have given me some really cool opportunities to like try new things that are coming up, right? And so that's always been kind of fun. And then being able to provide like feedback on like what we think is what we could use like help with, like in having that continuous conversation going, whether it's conversations about like a membership program or like whatever those different things are, like and feeling that element of being heard and then eventually seeing those things kind of come out is kind of gratifying, you know?
Yeah, we always like to tell people like we can't promise we'll do it tomorrow, but like we do want to know what's on your mind and to get there. So I'm glad that has rung true. Speaking of trying new things, we originally talked about this in relationship to Connect and that feature. So would love to hear a little bit more about kind of what features within Connect you're using and how that has changed your client communication and things like that.
Yeah. So Connect's been great. So the beauty of it has really been to give you an idea like how our phone system is currently set up. So I originally was using the text message feature that Mangomint has. So we were using that previously, and so one of the challenges that we also came across was like we've learned that like customers really appreciate being able to like communicate with us via text, which was great. The challenge that we also came up on was if someone was using those text messages to get back and forth with us, on occasion people would want to also call, right? So it was almost like you can text us through this certain number, and then you have to call us through this additional number, right? So I would have people that are like, hey, I tried to call you and you guys, it just had like an error or whatnot, right? So with Connect, I think the nice piece was like, it really kind of integrated a lot of that, right? So whenever someone was texting us and we were communicating back and forth, it's very easy to be able to call people. We now use that Connect line as our main number on the website as well. So when people are going in and they're going to go ahead and call us, like to actually know who that is like really nice. And it makes it even easier to book people because there's a little icon on the bottom of like the phone that's a little phone symbol they can just hit, and then it allowed me to go ahead and book those appointments more quickly. So there are a lot of little benefits like that have made things just like a little bit easier.
That's great. Yeah, I spoke to someone who described a similar previous setup, and the big thing she said was, I no longer had to admit to people that I didn't have their phone number saved for the voice call portion.
To add to that, I'll tell you, the other beauty of it is it makes it a lot easier to track those conversations with clients.
Yeah.
Right. So not only can we see like the communications that we have with every client via email, we can see it via text and we can see it via phone call. So while I'm not saying that it's like a full-blown CRM system, like it does allow us that transparency internally to like know that we have this history of this client. These are the things that were said to them. And then, naturally like marrying it with like flows and that type of stuff, it just kind of allows it like a larger picture for us to be like, what have we communicated? What did we say? Did we offer this person like a discount? Like we can see that grander picture thing. So that definitely makes it easier too, especially when evaluating that relationship with that client when we're on the phone with them, texting them or whatnot.
I was curious to ask you about flows, and I want to hear more about how you're using them, especially because I thought it was really interesting earlier when you were talking about the original research that you did for the business, kind of asking people, how do you want us to communicate with you? How often? All of that. I'm curious just generally how you use flows, but how this kind of communication suite in general pairs with that original, very like customized communication idea you were toying with.
One of the ways that we've kind of reapproached how we communicate with clients is like, it goes back to, can we be thoughtful, right? And if you think about how many text messages people get on a daily basis, it goes back to like when people are sitting here, we like working, we can have a conversation. And then there's a lot of like data out there that's like people get like a text message almost like within every hour, right? And then people typically read those text messages in the span of like a minute, right? And so I think kind of marrying that with flows, if you look at the way people use these different devices, we can adjust the messaging for them based on the channel. Right. So like the ultimate example is like why, like for us, one of the takeaways was we're not going to sit here and hammer people like via text message, like throughout the day, like, hey, we have all these different promotions and things like really going on. Right. So our approach to that was like, that's what email is for. Right. Like email is for like, hey, I have some time. I'm just kind of browsing through, like seeing like what communication I have going on with people. So like what we learned really quickly was like email, like if people have time to kind of really kind of communicate back and forth, email was that unique element to do that. So if we need to create a little bit more of a story, or if we need to have like a larger promotion or the larger amounts of information where someone can kind of sit down and they're like, hey, they're on a train, they're, doing other things, they can actually sit here and just kind of like scroll and like thoroughly read. when a client comes in, whenever they're like, hey, it's been like a month since their appointment, we thought that's where it made sense, right? So we're not constantly hammering people with text like on a daily basis. Like on average, like people may get like one, like, or maybe two text messages from us at max. If someone's getting an email and they're having the opportunity to go ahead and read through all that information, to learn the deeper story, that more the larger like membership program or like whatever those things are, that email made more sense for something like that. And then for a text message, it was meant to be like, hey, just a quick heads up. We're not meaning to like, interrupt your day, but it's just been like a month since we saw you. It's been 2 months, it's been 3 months. And that probably made more sense. And marrying that with flows, a lot of the data that we kind of recruited at the very beginning was like people like, just don't like freaking hammer me with a text message. Don't hammer me with like emails all the time. So it was more about less is more. And those communication patterns that people had, if you guys are familiar with like certain websites and stuff like overstock.com or like whoever, Macy's, just constant, every single email is like, we got this new sale. Well, it's like when you look at it that way, you lose that value, right? You lose that trust, no different than like Bed Bath & Beyond. Like, I don't want to go on my TED Talk about Bed Bath & Beyond, but like the 25% off coupon also created this value for people that they were like, if I don't have that coupon, I don't want to come in. And then so like I mentioned that to you because like we listened, we understood what people wanted, and that was our clientele, right? Other clienteles could be different, but knowing that they're different, there's so many different channels to communicate with people, whether it's like social media, text, email, like we can be more thoughtful on how we communicate and what we're communicating in those like different channels. So kind of looping this all in, the part with flows kind of comes in where initially when we were using this other point of sale system, we didn't have anything really automated, right? So what we started doing was when the clients came in, we have a little bit of a challenging situation to be able to show people where our building is and where our parking is. So in flows, what ended up happening was, we would follow up with clients, right? So that was really convenient after they came in. And then we also made sure they were prepped and ready before they came in. So someone booked the appointment, then literally like an hour before the appointment, they would get a text message from us with just photos of the building. Hey, just like a heads up, this is where we're located. This is like the front of the building. This is the back of the building. This is the parking lot area. And if you need to contact us, you can shoot us a call or text back immediately right here. And of course, to connect, we can communicate with them like back and forth, right? So like it allowed for that whole conversation to kind of come in the loop here, where that initial task of following up with people was kind of a headache, which we were doing manually, like texting everybody. It's been about a month. So, hey, just want to remind you, like, we'd love to kind of check back in with you. Versus now with flows, like having the opportunity to kind of tuck that away in an automated system and ask for reviews or like do those types of things. Or, mention to someone that we have a membership program they should be interested in, or like we sell packages, but whatever those other items are could now be cadenced into the system instead of me having to do it manually. So flows has definitely been like a really convenient part to like the whole like Mangomint equation.
It's so funny you mentioned the brands that you did, because immediately when you started talking about that, I was thinking of like every single furniture like liquidation brand that somehow now has my phone number and tells me every day about their amazing new promotion. I respect your approach in lieu of that, because that is like so aggravating.
Yeah, it is, right? And what it does is like, I don't even want to go deeply into like philosophical about this thing, but it's like we went from like the AOL era where if you got like an email, you're like, oh my God, like this is incredible, right? Someone thought of me, and it was this like magical moment. And we now got to the point where it's just like, I wish I could stop emails, right? Like just the volume of just crap that I get on this constant basis is so frustrating. And so like we went from like that one simple email. And if you go back a couple more decades, like think back to like World War II stuff or like, whatever that is, like, people had one letter they could write to somebody, right? And that was like it. I might not even see this person again, right? And so we went from, these few communications that just meant so much and that left such an impact on all of our lives to like Now I can text you in like, within like 30 seconds. Hell, we can FaceTime within a couple of seconds, right? We need to be on call almost all the time, right? So like if we can respect people's boundaries, I think whether or not like, clients aren't coming up to us every day and being like, hey, I just really appreciate you not blowing up my inbox or my text messages. Maybe they're not saying that, but I think there is this internal trust that people have that naturally gets built out. So maybe you don't see that on your everyday interaction with a client, but I think it does naturally build that trust as well as it does build like brand value also,
Especially in such a people focused business, there's such a strange juxtaposition or like contrast of, like you said earlier, kind of this therapist like relationship and being really vulnerable and very face to face with someone to then like, here's your 20th email from us this month. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, even if people aren't outright saying it or commenting on it. One last feature I did want to ask you about, you mentioned memberships and packages. Tell me like how that fits into the landscape and what you've got set up there.
So our membership and packages run pretty differently. So it's kind of interesting how we approach it. So like I think with like packages, everyone has like a different strategy, right? Some people are like, hey, you can have like 3 of these like packages, or you can have one package with like 3 services in it. You can also have like, 6 of them, you got 12 of them, so everyone has a different strategy given their clientele, right? So I think with us, like with the way we kind of approach it was like, if you're willing to have a little bit of commitment and you're going to get these same, 1, 2, 3-ish like services done like every time, like, you're going to come in to get a facial like 3 to 4 times a year. So great. There's like a quick little package for that. Here's like the discount for that. Great. That's like an opportunity, right? And then with membership, so the way we've set that up is like, hey, there's like a monthly like payment for this, and that membership, that payment they provide acts like credit. So once again, it kind of like loops back into that trust factor, right? There are a lot of massage places, like chain type places that are like just membership everything, right? Like if basically when someone comes in, basically the hardcore sales pitch is they just need to be a part of the membership, right? So great, like I'm not against that, but like we're not in it to have everyone on this like membership program. Like for us, the purpose of it was, can we create something that felt thoughtful, but it honestly felt like someone was invested within like our organization, right? So when they spend time with us, they invest in us, we want to invest back in them, right? So that can be discounts off like services, it can be discount on products. And I think the packages versus the membership kind of skewed like a little bit differently, where I think packages, people have some level of commitment, right? And are willing to not fully commit to like a full year of services, but they were willing to commit to several, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, like whatever the service volume was for that package. So that was one type of person. And then for membership, those are people that are like deeply committed, right? That were like, hey, like no matter what I do, the membership is like kind of there for me because I know I'm gonna be doing this for like a long term, right? And of course, if clients kind of felt like that wasn't good fit for them forever, they can always like cancel as well. But it allowed for more options for people. So it also, and I say options, it gave people a variety of ways to approach it, where it's like, hey, do I want to spend a bulk amount up front, or am I willing to just have like the subscription type of option that I could pay like a little bit every month? So not only did it fit people's lifestyles, it also adapted and adjusted to people's budgets.
So you have yours set up like a credit-based bank kind of system where they can then apply that how they like to different services.
Yeah. So you nailed it. So the way the packages were like, basically you buy 3 of these services up front, there's a discount like that's there. And then for the membership, what was unique for like what we've done is if someone signs up for this, you get 20% off on like all the services that we have to offer, whether it's a manicure, pedicure, or whether it's a massage or like a facial. So everything kind of got covered there. That's basically the difference, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. The membership is for the ride or die Menscape crew.
Yeah. And so like I'll add this point, like so going back to what you said about the accrual part. So we did that for trust, right? So
Yeah.
like we wanted to feel like if someone had invested, $100 with us on our membership every single month, like it allows for them to kind of have it even accrue over time, just in case they can't immediately come back in. They just know, hey, when I do like come in, I'm gonna have all this like money left, and it leaves it so people don't love feeling rushed, right? And so, while it is like a marketing tactic that a lot of organizations tend to use, um, for us, it was built on trust, right? Like if someone's going to spend this much money with us, hey, when you come in, like you actually have $100 of credit left, or you hadn't been in a couple months, you still have that credit still available. So it allowed for people to just kind of like lay back and be like, hey, I'm not this phase of my life is not allowing me to go in and take care of myself as much as I normally want. So instead, hey, I do know that when I come back 3, 4 months like later, my life settles in, I know I'm going to have that money and that credit available for me.
It's waiting for me when I'm back on my own terms and
Totally.
can like, reprioritize that self-care moment.
Absolutely. So the great examples, like, people are so oversubscribed, right? So people have like Netflix, people have like Hulu, like Disney Plus, like Paramount, like all that stuff, right? And then we don't realize that we're losing that money, right? So if you're just like watching Stranger Things, you're fully committed this whole season because you're starting from like day one of like that program, like then you're probably losing out on like Disney Plus or Paramount. Like there's just so much content that's like out there that we're kind of like losing money on these other additional subscriptions. So in our case, when we built this thing out, it was like I don't want people to feel like they're losing their money, right? And I mean, we go so far and above and beyond the norm, in that like if we have clients that are like haven't come in like 3 or 4 months, like I will call or text somebody like, yo, dude, just like a heads up, like you have a couple $100 of credits like that's like built up in your membership program. Just want to make sure, do you want to keep on doing this, or do you feel like we should go ahead and like cancel this or pause it, right? So like it kind of goes back to like just really building that relationship, when like the easy way out is just like you just kind of let that thing burn, and have those clients that are going to kind of come back in and eventually use it, or you keep on accruing that income. But I don't think it's being honest, right? Because like they've also trusted us to take care of them, right? And once again, like a simple phone call or text message that, hey, it's been like a couple months since we saw you. Just a heads up, you have a couple $100 that are accrued. Like it allows for, once again, that level of like transparency that, hey, we're not here to just take someone's like money. We're here to like provide value in your life to hopefully improve your life too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Which in the long term is, I'm sure, far more fruitful to everyone involved, including you. Even if someone says, yeah, pause it today, that is a way better taste to leave in someone's mouth than the alternative.
Yeah, you're right. And like we've had clients that are like, hey, I'm just a heads up, I'm gonna be out for like a couple of months. I'm getting surgery. So I'm probably not gonna be able to come in. So, we adjust according to like what they want, right? And that's like I said, like, if you look at all the different variables that we have, right? Every business needs to generate a certain amount of revenue, so they can feed their staff. They get paid. But the most expensive thing to build is trust, right? And so that's kind of why we have those like gestures like that.
Awesome. Well, that is the majority of things. So thank you for chatting.
Yeah,
this has been awesome.
You guys are great. And
Thank
for
you.
that, like I just like high fives, like all the way around.